Our speaker today is Dr. Sherry Magill, whose career has been in higher education and private philanthropy. She has a weekly Substack column, Jack's Look Redux, that highlights local issues, and she has served as the president of the Jessie Ball DuPont Fund and spearheaded that beautiful conversion of our former main library into the Jessie Ball DuPont Center, which houses so many volunteer organizations. I was terrified we'd lose that place, and I'm so glad it's there. She currently chairs the Charles F. Kettering Foundation and LISC-Jacksonville Board of Directors and serves on the Locust Board, a statewide financial intermediary. So please welcome Dr. Magill.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here, and I just love what you all stand for. These remarks are a little more personal than I'm used to sharing in public, but my really dear friend Peter, who's written my epitaph, you have already heard it, asked me to talk about the values that inform my life and work, where I think we find ourselves as a people and what I think people who care about our collective well-being are called to do. Simply put, I share the ethical framework articulated in the Christian Gospels, especially the Golden Rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And what Jesus says in the book of Matthew resonates with me. Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. The Golden Rule strikes me as a good value to try to live by, individually and collectively. It's a prescription for how humans ought to treat one another, especially if we wish to live a life of relative peace. As Jesus' comment suggests, why we should behave this way is because each human being is a child of God. I also believe deeply that we have a responsibility to treat the earth and all its bounty with humility, understanding that this planet was bestowed upon us by God or Mother Nature or an accident of evolution and is not of our own making. We're stewards for a time, not Lord and Master. We're caretakers, not creators. I am a pragmatist, deeply interested in what works when we attempt to alleviate human suffering and better the planet. I do not like ideology. And finally, I believe deeply in the power of human agency, individually and collectively, to change the world for the better. I've witnessed it from my youth to today. I've seen people accomplish incredible things against exceptional odds. So how did I come to this place? I grew up during the Jim Crow era in a small Alabama town under a brutal authoritarian governmental regime that enforced America's version of apartheid. We don't typically use that language to describe the Deep South prior to the '64 Civil Rights Act and the '65 Voting Rights Act, but in fact, that is what it was. A brutal, authoritarian apartheid system where whites enjoyed the full rights of citizenship and blacks did not. State government enforced a rigid separation of the races through state-sponsored violence, where state troopers, local police officers, and the Ku Klux Klan were often the same people. I routinely walked through our hospital's white-only doorway to visit my mother, frequented the white-only Dairy Queen, and drank from white-only water fountains. The woman who made me a sandwich after school and cleaned our clothes, Pinky Mae Harrison, rode in the back seat of the car while my mother and I rode in the front. She was a grown woman. I was a mere child. It would have been dangerous for her to ride in the front seat. My town was located 12 miles north of Montgomery, 30 miles east of Selma, 90 miles south of Birmingham. I know y'all are old enough, because I can tell by your hair color, to understand what that means. Younger people want to know, why is she talking about geography? But from the age of 11 to 18, my life was influenced by racial violence. The bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church, where 4 girls my age were murdered. A race riot in my small town. Freedom rioters bombed in Anniston and beaten in Montgomery. Governor George Wallace's stand in the schoolhouse door of what became my future alma mater. Sheriff Bull Connor's attacks on black demonstrators in downtown Birmingham, many of them children. The Selma March, the murder of the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., and my personal experience navigating race relations during my high school senior year, when my public school was fully racially integrated following a federal court order. As Jim Crow came to a violent end, I came of age. My parents were public servants. My dad first an Air Force officer and then a hospital administrator and a Social Security field officer. My mother was a registered nurse who worked in our local hospital and saw her fair share of small-town racial violence. Together, they shaped my ethical values, my sense of personal obligation to something greater than myself. We were confirmed Lutherans and attended church regularly. I think it's kind of funny that we grew up in the Deep South as Lutherans in an extended family of Catholics in a Southern Baptist town. That's a little hard to square, if you will. My mother was from New Hampshire, not Alabama. She was a deeply religious woman whose background was Norwegian Lutheran. She believed that she was called to serve her fellow human beings and was deeply rooted in the social gospel, an interpretation of Christianity that requires us to serve our fellow human beings, not beat them over the head with a baseball bat. The values of the culture in which I was raised, however, Alabama state law and social norms, were diametrically opposed to what my parents were teaching me. One held that each and every human being is created in the image of God, endowed equally with rights that derive from one's being born human, and that government's purpose is to protect those rights. The other held that we're not equal, not created equal, that some folks are deserving in the eyes of God and some are not. In fact, some are created lesser than human, and the role of government is to enforce this hierarchical system, ensuring maximum freedom for the ruling class and brutal enforcement for those who dared get out of line. I was a kid and a teenager, impressionable, and just young enough and just old enough to grasp the tension, the hypocrisy, the paradox, this irreconcilable difference between competing value structures. After high school, I spent a decade formally studying American political theory, religious history, and literature. I served as an administrator of a small private liberal arts college in Maryland, where I sometimes taught courses on the American South, and I spent 27 years as a grant maker. My academic study focused on a set of ideas and juxtapositions: justice, democracy, slavery and citizenship, community and individualism, American social reform movements, especially those of the 19th century, abolition groups, women's groups, labor groups, Hull House, the Salvation Army, the Y, and Scouting. All examples of people organizing to provide services, but also to demand change in social and economic policy and to build community across difference. To bind people together in a common enterprise, small d democracy, if you will, or the social gospel of Walter Rauschenbusch, about whom I wrote a dissertation. Rauschenbusch believed that the gospel of Jesus is radically democratic. I guess I do too. My studies and work experience reinforced in me values that began to take shape when I was a teenager. So what did I learn from all of this work, this study, this growing up when I grew up, where I grew up, in the family in which I grew up? I think several things. The human story is one of oppression and resistance. The powerful never willingly give up power. People can and do resist oppression and find individual and collective agency through which they can and do build a better, more equitable, and caring world. The civil rights movement was a lot of things, but in its essence, it was a movement about the inherent divinity of humankind. Its basic value structure is a religious one, so well articulated by the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. It held that all people are made in the image of God. As such, the divine lives in every human being. Politically, this notion that all people are children of God is best expressed, I think, in the American Declaration of Independence and codified in the federal Constitution's preamble and Bill of Rights. We are made equal in the eyes of our common Creator, and our rights derive from this basic fact. They're not given to us by some government or some powerful group. The main purpose of government is to ensure and protect these rights. I am well aware that when declared and when codified, our American founding documents did not include women, the enslaved, and those without property. But the values they express were and remain universal and revolutionary, all created equal and endowed with rights that cannot be taken away. This is a political belief system rooted in a religious idea, one that connects an understanding of the divine to the purpose of government. The purpose of our central government is to establish justice and promote the general welfare. Nowhere did we write that the purpose of our government is to enrich the rich, afflict the afflicted, to support private individual financial interests at the expense of the common good, to coddle the powerful. Nowhere. The tension that pervaded my upbringing, my mother versus Alabama's dominant culture, I think is alive and well. It may have always been thus. The present moment reminds me of Jim Crow, Alabama, as powerful social media influencers, think tanks, and legal minds currently work overtime to convince us that we must go back to the world our founding fathers lived in, not the one they imagined, one built on a hierarchy of races and gender. It's interesting or curious to me that Jim Crow and MAGA not only share values, but they have in common a set of ideas that hold that the federal government is evil, freedom was made for people with white skin, and everyone else living in America is less deserving, less human, and in some sense dangerous. To complicate this moment, everything we read and witness tells us we're experiencing at least 3 extraordinary revolutions at the same time. One is the rise of authoritarianism and the demise of democracy at home and abroad. A growing number of people who've grown up with the advantage of living under democratic rules and norms now think democratic systems are failing them. I think they misunderstand the failure, which for me is the concentration of too much wealth in too few hands that has failed working people. If we abandon democracy, what do we embrace? Authoritarian oligarchs will not save jobs and livelihoods, nor protect individual rights as Americans have understood those rights since the 1960s. The second revolution is this anti-immigrant fervor. We're living on a planet where millions upon millions of people are on the move, seeking refuge from flooding, war, killing gangs, lack of work, and political oppression. They're in search of safety and a better life, yet countries around the world, not simply our own, feel threatened by their arrival. Different customs, language, skin color, and religion set these people apart from the dominant culture which feels its very existence is under attack. Instead of providing comfort, instead of learning something from Jesus' parable about loaves and fishes, we name these folks illegals and aliens. denying them refuge, and in some cases murdering them. We and other countries talk about closing the door on opportunity. It's disheartening at best that governments cannot pragmatically figure out how to collectively address this challenge of desperate people on the move. The third revolution is the rapid pace of technological change and the ubiquity of social media. Scholars and social psychologists are ringing the 5-alarm bell, begging us to understand that social media is an island where hate lives. In fact, the more hateful the language, the more people like it. You may or may not know that around 2012, Twitter and Facebook created the like button. And when that happened, this revolution just took off as if it's on steroids. The more hateful the language, the more people like it. And so the folks who run these platforms figured out how to create algorithms that repeat the hate. Is just stunning to me, but I don't spend any time on social media. But just think about it. The more hateful, the more people like it. So the more it's perpetuated. No wonder folks are out there killing each other over something someone said on social media. It's just stunning to me. Adolescents, these psychologists tell us, live their lives in an artificial online universe with little face-to-face interaction with humans, very little eye contact, and very little time spent outdoors, very little time just playing the way people in my age group just went outside and played. The result of all of this, these psychologists tell us, is adolescent anxiety, hopelessness, dread, and suicidal ideation. Those who track hateful social media posts, left and right, worry that our current political culture will result in increased violence, while psychologists worry that our very definition of what it means to be human is being radically transformed into something unrecognizable, especially given the rapid advancement of artificial intelligence, and you may know it's now being called alternative intelligence. Sadly, folks are making a fortune spewing hate on social media. It's a lucrative business. Together, these revolutions are dehumanizing. Empathy, we heard a wonderful definition of empathy a few moments ago. Empathy is talked about as if it's a left-wing nutty idea, suitable only for weak people. Imagine that. It's the triumph of Alabama's dominant cultural values on steroids, rooted in America's slaveholding culture. I can't tell you, but at 73, it's hard for me to accept this notion that the world I grew up in and was dismantled is the world I'm now beginning to live in. I don't know about you, but I feel a little schizophrenic sometimes. And so I wonder, who will teach the children to love? Who will stand in for my mother and teach youngsters like me that the state of Alabama was wrong, that the God of the Christian Gospels did not shun some of his children? So what do we, people who believe in the inherent divinity of human beings, do? We who want to live in a world where all are treated with respect and dignity, where all belong. We who believe in the power of the good and want to live freely and in peace. We must keep hope alive, I think. Foster and strengthen face-to-face community, what you all are doing. But I also have begun to believe that we need to document this moment. Whether it is worshiping here together or volunteering in our nonprofit sector, which really I think is my church, to ease the burdens of the dispossessed among us, we simply have to discover and rediscover what we have in common, not online, but in person. And we need to help others do likewise, especially adolescents and children. We must find some other-centered common cause. Naively, I thought the common thread of climate change would bring us all together, but it hasn't happened yet. I'm still hopeful that it will. We know that when the hurricane hits or the tornado hits, what does the media tell us about ourselves? Oh, how wonderful people came out and helped each other. They didn't even know each other. We talk about it as if it's a big surprise. And it's probably because we don't talk about ourselves that way very often. But in tragedy, we do, or that kind of tragedy. And we do that. We do come together. As we live through these revolutions that work together to destabilize our sense of reality and undermine the best in humans, it might be important that we leave behind a written record that articulates what a good society values, that keeps alive the spirit of the Gospels and the aspirations of our Declaration and our preamble, especially as we witness governments around the planet kill their own people. Keep a journal, just as Anne Frank did, not on social media, but privately for some future someone to discover. We must, I think, bear witness to what's happening and continue to argue that there is a different way, a better way, a more loving way. When the generations that follow us look for inspiration, for hope, we must leave behind a record that helps them believe in the basic sanctity of human beings, in individual and collective agency, and in democratically elected government whose purpose is the protection of human rights. And for the sake of our individual sanity, we should also all take a walk in the park or in the woods. Seriously, these same social psychologists are explaining to us that Mother Nature is the antidote to what ails us, a connection to something that we did not create, but is filled with awe and wonder. I long for a vigorous defense of an old-fashioned idea that grounded the American experience, and that is the idea that human beings, despite our propensity toward self-interest, toward violence, and total domination over those we think are lesser than, are capable of reason, of coming together to discover those very things we have in common, and to living our collective lives in the spirit of the Golden Rule, do unto others, and the preamble to our federal Constitution, we the people. Will love triumph over hate? I don't know. I do know that what parents, grandparents, teachers, aunts and uncles, adults teach their children matters. It certainly mattered in my life. It will determine to a certain extent how they act in the world. So I'll leave you with this, with the Martin Luther King Jr. eloquent comments when he received the 1964 Nobel Peace Prize. And I'm quoting him. I refuse to accept despair as the final response to the ambiguities of history. I have the audacity to believe that peoples everywhere can have 3 meals a day for their bodies, education and culture for their minds, and dignity, equality, and freedom for their spirits. I believe that what self-centered people have torn down, people other-centered can build up. I believe that too. I thank you for the opportunity to be with you. Peter, it's always wonderful to see you. Thank you for the invitation. And I am grateful that folks like you are determined to keep hope alive. Thank you.